So it's been just over 100 days since 20 students and 6 teachers were murdered inside the halls of Connecticut's Sandy Hook Elementary School, a crime so unfathomable. Those 26 murders shook the nation to its core. Today, within the next hour, Connecticut's governor will sign its response to that tragedy into law. New gun control measures that will be among the most strict in the nation. The bill passed its final hurdle inside the state capitol in Hartford early this morning with bipartisan support.
Connecticut now, with the governor's signature, will have the strongest gun safety laws in the country. Hopefully that is some measure of comfort to the victims of Newtown. I think we owed it to them to take this seriously.
Connecticut is not the only state to enact a new gun crackdown in the wake of Newtown. Maryland's House also gave approval yesterday to a sweeping bill, and that bill is now headed back to the state Senate. This action by the states coming as the president went back out on the road yesterday to California again to push to Denver and on to California to push for reform on a federal level.
We knew from the beginning the change wouldn't be easy, and we knew that there'd be powerful voices that would do everything they could to run out the clock, change the subject, ignore the majority of the American people. The only way this time will be different is if the American people demand that this time it must be different, that this time we must do something to protect our communities and our kids.
And again, the president was first in Colorado before moving on to California. And joining me now from California Congressman Adam Schiff. Sir, it's great to have you on with me this morning.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
I want to talk with you about what we're seeing out of Connecticut more specifically and what that state has been able to do. As we look at the gun control bill that it has passed, it increased background checks, it widens the assault weapons ban eligibility rules for ammunition purchases, also has a dangerous weapon offender registry. And as we look at the new Quinnipiac poll out that says, do you support stricter gun control in this country? 53% support stricter gun control. Sir, why can't anything get done in Washington, D.C. when the numbers like this nationwide reflect the appetite for it?
That's a very good question, and I think it just points to what a dysfunctional Congress we have right now. When certain things, for example, the universal background checks, not only enjoy majority support, but enjoy the support of 90% of the American people. It's one thing when you can't get something through that is, dividing the country fairly right down the middle, but this isn't. Even a strong majority, overwhelming majority of gun owners, an overwhelming majority of NRA members support universal background checks. So why can't we get this through in short order? We should be able to, and I think we will be able to, but there are other steps in addition to universal background checks we should also be taking that also enjoy majority support, like a ban on assault weapons, like a ban on high-capacity clips. And we're just going to have to fight this out and get this done. If we can't be inspired by tragedies like Sandy Hook, I don't know what it will take to get this Congress moving in the direction the country wants us to undertake.
As you mentioned, the new Quinnipiac poll out showing that 91% of those asked do support having background checks. We have a nationwide ban on high-capacity magazines, 58% support that. Meanwhile, sir, we have this dichotomy going on in this country right now where we talk about Connecticut, we talk about Maryland passing new gun control reforms, state legislation weakening gun laws, though. We look at states like Maine, Virginia, Kentucky, Michigan, Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, Utah, all weakening gun restrictions since Newtown. Why do you think this dichotomy exists if the appetite, again, over the larger collective of the country is to see a tighter control for gun violence?
Well, it is very difficult to understand and explain. Certainly there are regional differences in how the gun issue is viewed. I remember when I was first elected in 2000, a race that many people thought was decided at the presidential level by the gun issue. I was asked what was the nature of that issue in Los Angeles, and I said it's really not so much about hunting or self-protection, it's about gang violence, it's about drive-by shootings. And they asked one of my Democratic colleagues from Oklahoma the same question, and he said, well, in my district, it's also not so much about hunting or self-protection, it's about Lexington and Concord. So plainly, even between Democratic districts, there's a wide diversity of viewpoint that is, shared throughout the country. But even in those states that you pointed out, where there may be rolling back gun safety laws, there is still, even those states, overwhelming support for universal background checks. And when there's that kind of disconnect between what the people in those states and all over the country want and what they're getting from the state government and what they're getting from their Congress, You have to say that the political system is broken, that some of the special interests like the NRA are too strong, that they're pushing forward minority views not shared by the majority of the American people.
Sir, when we talk about what the president said yesterday in Denver, this is his trip out west that's being described as a cash dash to raise money for Democrats with an eye on the midterm, stopping in Denver and now in your home state of California. He was quoted at a DCCC fundraiser saying, look, my intention here is to try to get as much done with the Republican Party over the 2 years as I can, because we can't have perpetual campaigns. He went on to say, but I would be dishonest if I didn't say that it would be a whole lot easier to govern if I had Nancy Pelosi as Speaker. Again, speaking to a California, San Francisco crowd there, trying to raise money in San Francisco. What do you make of that, though? The fact Nancy Pelosi, he had Nancy Pelosi before, and a lot of people would look at that time period as saying that they didn't get a lot done constructively in Washington, D.C. How do you think that would be different come 2014?
Well, you know, I think we did get a lot done. In fact, we got one of the most revolutionary changes to health care, an expansion of health care to 32 million people. So that was a very significant achievement, I think, and obviously a hard-fought victory. But certainly with the Democratic House, a lot more would be possible. These gun bills would be originating in the House, so we wouldn't be, wondering whether even what gets through the Senate will get a vote. I think we'd be a lot farther along in comprehensive immigration reform. That would have a much better shot at passage. As it is, the only way I think that's going to pass in the House is if there's a departure from the so-called Hastert rule, and they allow a vote without a majority of the majority party. On a whole host of issues, we would make, I think, much greater progress. We would have things like the Disclose Act, which will disclose some of these vast contributions flowing in on the gun issue so that Americans could be informed about who is trying to buy elections. So a lot of these changes would take place with a Democratic House, and I think the President's exactly right about that. But in the 2 years until then, until the American people can speak out again, he is right to try to work on a bipartisan basis and advance this agenda as much as we possibly can.
Sir, some people would push back to say that Americans prefer a divided government, making sure that there is going to be that contrast between our elected leaders and with control, especially when it comes to controlling our spending in this country. Right now, because we have such major deficits and the fact that the sequester has been such a big issue, we have the president now giving back 5% of his salary, and other people on the Hill doing the same thing. We see there the base salary of the president at $400,000, giving back 5% would be 20 grand. Members of Congress giving back: Tammy Duckworth, Eleanor Holmes Norton, Mark Begich. Is this something that we should see more of you, more elected people on the Hill, be willing to do?
Well, I applaud what the President's doing, and I think Congress should consider certainly doing the same. But frankly, for the federal employees that are being hurt right now by the sequester, it would be much more effective for us to put an end to the sequester, to put an end to really taking it out of the hide of federal employees who have already, like members of Congress and others, had a pay freeze for many years. In the case of Congress, that's certainly well-deserved, and as the President pointed out, we may need to go further than that and not just freeze their salary, but roll it back. But the most constructive thing, I think, at the end of the day, that will help the American people and help federal employees is to do away with this sequester that is indiscriminate in its cuts. It cuts the good programs with the bad, that degrades the quality of our ability to provide our defense to the country, as well as social services and care for our senior citizens. So that I don't want to lose sight of, because I think that's the most important thing, is putting an end to this destructive sequester that will dampen our recovery.
California Congressman Adam Schiff, sir, good to have you on this morning. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just ahead, the shocking video